welcome to World History and Geo class today. Looks like one of the vibier World History teachers, as we can see. Like, we got a little Woodstock thing and a little Beatles thing in this wave, so it's a good one. But we're not talking about World Geo or History. Exactly, we're going to do a short little video continuing the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason thing. I just wanted to clear something up. I realized I was kind of hasty with the last part of it in particular, so that is the fourth class of objects, really the subject of knowing or willing, self-consciousness. Because he starts out by talking about how the knower never knows itself as knowing. It's like impossible. You only know yourself as willing, and that's kind of a miracle or something. You know, that's how the chapter starts out before he gets to it as the law of motivation, and I didn't really talk about it as the law of motivation. So he says that really this last class as the law of motivation is the same exact thing as causality, but just causality passing through self-consciousness. So he's like, you look at other people as objects, and you don't know exactly what's determining their actions. You assume that something causal is going on, that it's not utterly inexplicable. You feel justified in asking, why did this person do this thing? But then from the self-conscious side of things, he's like, you get kind of like a sneak peek into the secret of what's going on, and you realize that it's just a motivation that's coming through representation, that it's like motivation is just causality passing through the intellect or whatever. So this shoots right off into what we're going to be talking about in the next it's not a book, I guess. Well, next essay, his essay on the freedom of the will. He kind of directs you right to it, actually, at the end of the section on the law of motivation. But he says that, you know, like any action from the subjective side of things is a result of, it's a combination of like your inborn character with an external motivator, and those interacting to produce an action, and that it's really nothing else. So we'll go into that essay next, but I just want to say that you know, he's pretty firm with that, like freedom of the will and some kind of, you know, like liberal free will, I guess they call it. And this debate still goes on all the time today, that can't possibly exist. You don't exactly have choice between two different things in the sense that you can really do one or the other of them. You can't really do both, because of course you can only do one of those things in reality. And which one that ends up being is going to be a combination between your inborn character and the motivation, basically. So we'll get more into that. I'm not going to just say that that's the be-all, end-all of the story of free will. It's certainly not. But if you don't at least contend with that account, it's going to be shallow, I guess. He also says here, I think I can pull this one up really quick. At the end here, has a nice little section on memory. Oh, this might be in the general remarks thing. Yeah. So we can just do a quick review of the four different kinds. So he says, like, you know, he calls it the principle of sufficient reason, but really that's like necessity. He just says plainly, the principle of sufficient reason in all its forms is the sole principle and sole support of all necessity. For necessity has no true and clear meaning except that of the inevitability of the consequent with the positing of the ground. So basically necessity and the principle can be used interchangeably. And he summarizes the four different classes using necessity instead. So he's like, there's logical necessity. Once the premises have been admitted, the conclusion must follow. Physical necessity, this is causality. As soon as the causes appear, the effect cannot fail. Mathematical necessity, which I should just read. whereof every relation stated by a true geometrical theorem is as that theorem affirms it to be, and every correct calculation remains irrefutable. I don't know if he worded that as strongly there as he does in other places, but and then fourth, he calls moral necessity, by virtue whereof every human being, even every animal, after the motive has appeared, must carry out the action which alone is in accordance with his inborn and immutable character, which is kind of Kantian, but we'll talk more about that in the next one. This action then ensues just as inevitably as does every other effect of a cause, although on account of the difficulty of fathoming and completely knowing the individual empirical character and its allotted sphere of knowledge, it is not so easy to predict as with every other cause what the action will be. So that's, that's the thing about it, is that it is a hell of a lot more complicated than what's going on at just like a purely physical level when you get to the level of motivation. And just because it's so complicated and we don't have cognitive access to our whole self, that we remain unpredictable even to ourselves. We can get a feeling for what we might do in a certain situation, and over time we can sort of know what sort of person we are, so that how we might act, we can be more reliably predictive with those things. But we still are such complicated things, and there's so many factors at play in a given situation that just because it's unpredictable doesn't mean that it's not completely and entirely explicable according to the principle of sufficient reason, which I think even nowadays with like the quantum mechanics kind of revolution, we would say that it's not just unpredictable because of the complexity, but it is just fundamentally unpredictable at the quantum level, because that's how shit seems to be. But there's no consensus on that anyhow, but you might hear that kind of account anyhow. So I just want to clear that up, because I didn't really talk about the law of causality in terms of motivation in the first video. I also was pretty hasty talking about the way that as soon as you've like conceived of an object in any sort of way, you've determined it according to some sort of subjective thing. I said that and I was like, I don't know if that was really totally clear. Or you can't meet with anything except the subject. And this is really just what transcendental idealism is all about. But the way that I like that Schopenhauer talks about it all the time is, and as opposed to how Kant maybe talks about it, is it's kind of clear that he's talking about the brain, and just that I'm trying to find like a good little passage here where he talks about it, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. No, probably not. I know there is one in this chapter though. Okay, yeah. Here we go. That what is inborn, and thus a priori and independent of experience, and the whole of our cognitive faculty is absolutely restricted to the formal part of knowledge. In other words, to the consciousness of the intellect's peculiar functions and of the manner of their only possible activity. So when you hear a priori or independent of experience, always already, for him it's clear that he's saying that this is like part of the form of the brain. Like this is the peculiar function of the brain and the way that its peculiar manner of activity, so that anytime that you conceive of any object in any particular way, that you're really at the same time expressing the way that your brain is capable of picturing it or whatever. So you're determining both at the same time, and this is really what transcendental idealism is kind of all about. It's like that the object and the subject are mutually determining each other simultaneously. And if you start from a materialism side of things, you're never going to get to the ultimate explanation of things. And if you start from the subjective side or the idealism side, that you're never going to get. And so like there's kind of a recent book all about Schopenhauer, like decoding his metaphysics or something. I don't have it handy, but there's not a lot of work on this guy generally. But this one, he's supposedly decoding Schopenhauer's metaphysics, but then on his website he says that he is an idealist, that he believes in idealism. And I get how you could do that, because like I think Schopenhauer was more concerned oftentimes with supporting the vein of idealism in the philosophical tradition coming from Berkeley and all of them through Kant and to him, and more like against the materialists. So there's strains of his work that have a more idealist flavor than materialist. But ultimately, if you're landing on one side or the other, then and you're claiming to be like Schopenhauerian or something like that, then you've obviously misunderstood something, because he thinks that both are wrong. They're both one-sided perspectives. If you start from the subject and try to work your way to the object, you can't make that leap across. And if you start from the object, try to work your way back to the subject, you can't make that leap across. And that's what transcendental idealism is trying to do, is say those are two sides of the same coin, basically. And that's why it works so well, and that's why you still hear people reiterate that today in all kinds of scientific disciplines. Physicists, neuroscientists, and etc. all make kind of transcendental idealism claims, but if you call it that, it kind of gets a bad rap, because it's really more associated with Kant. And like I remember seeing an interview with like Brian McGee on YouTube, who is my favorite Schopenhauerian, but he was interviewing somebody who's like, yeah, I suppose if you started from some Kantian premises that you should never ascribe to, then you can agree with Schopenhauer or something like that. But I don't know. I've said all the constructive things I have to say about it. I just think that it's about time we reconsidered those premises, because yep. This is a low quality education. I'll just end it like that.